day of the conference. I'm Kyle Berry. I'm a graduate student here, both at the seminary and at the School of Music, working on 2 degrees at once, because I'm overly ambitious. This is the first time I've gotten to present at Alleluia. It's actually the first time I've been here in general, so I'm really excited to be here and to talk about something that I've been working through myself in my own ministry for a number of years. This fall, in one of my classes here, Christian Scriptures, I was supposed to do an exegetical paper about something in the Old Testament, and I kind of randomly picked this chapter, 2 Samuel chapter 6, because I've always had a fascination with David, and I thought it'd be an interesting chapter to do. But as I got into it, I found that what I think the chapter was addressing was the same thing that I struggled with in my ministry. So today we're going to go through kind of some of the findings that I had through that paper, what I researched, as well as some practical ideas about how this can manifest in church life in general. So, first off, the problem was my very first church job was in a church, a Methodist church in southern Kentucky. They, like so many churches, had 2 services. One of them, on the far side there, the early service was our contemporary service. Contemporary. In southern Kentucky, contemporary sounds a lot like bluegrass. It was downstairs in the fellowship hall, and it was the early service. They had Sunday school, and then upstairs, here in the sanctuary, we had our traditional service, which was also not very traditional. And during my time there, the pastor, you can kind of see there in the slide here, him and I talked a lot about why we think the people who came to each service came to the service. It was never about the music or the style. When we asked people, they would never say, "Oh, I like this music," or "Oh, I want this kind of service." So over time, we talked more and more, and what we decided on is we think that one group of people was looking for a closeness with God. They wanted an intimacy with God. And another person wanted God to be farther off and separate and holy. We called it distance and intimacy for a long time. It was a way to understand the congregation, but it was a way to understand also, what eventually came to mind, was it's a way to understand worship as well, in these 2 dichotomies. And this is what I found in 2 Samuel. So I've printed out the chapter for you. We're going to read it through quickly, just because it's not a super popular scripture that most people read on a regular basis. So this is 2 Samuel 6 from the NLT. Then David again gathered all the elite troops in Israel, 30,000 in all. He led them to Bela of Judah to bring back the ark of God, which bears the name of the Lord of Heaven's armies, who is enthroned between the cherubim. They placed the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from Abinadab's house, which was on a hill. Uzzah and Ahio, Abinadab's sons, were guiding the cart that carried the ark of God. Ahio walked in front of the ark, and David and all the people of Israel were celebrating before the Lord, singing songs, playing all kinds of musical instruments, lyres, harps, tambourines, castanets, cymbals. If you ever get a chance to do a word study on some of those instrument names, they are not what they say. We translate those to English very poorly. Anyway, but when they arrived at the threshing floor of Nacon, the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah reached out with his hand and steadied the ark of God. Then the Lord's anger was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him dead because of this. So Uzzah died right there beside the ark. David was angry because the Lord's anger had burst out against Uzzah. He named that place Perez Uzzah, which means to burst out against Uzzah, as it's still called today. David was now afraid of the Lord, and he asked, "How can I ever bring the ark of the Lord back into my care?" Yes. Okay, so David decided not to move the ark of the Lord into the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom of Gath. The ark of the Lord remained there in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and his entire household. Then King David was told, "The Lord has blessed Obed-Edom's household and everything he has because of the ark of God." So David went there and brought the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with great celebration. After the men who were carrying the ark of the Lord had gone 6 steps, David sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. And David danced before the Lord with all his might, wearing a priestly garment. So David and all the people brought up the ark of the Lord with shouts of joy and the blowing of ram's horns. You always go up to Jerusalem, never go down to Jerusalem. But as the ark of the Lord entered the city of David, Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked down from her window. When she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she was filled with contempt for him. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the special tent David had prepared for it. And David sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings to the Lord. When he had finished the sacrifices, David blessed the people in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies. They gave to every Israelite man and woman in the crowd a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, and a cake of raisins. Then all the people returned to their houses. When David returned home to bless his own family, Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet him. She was in disgust. How distinguished the king of Israel looked today, shamelessly exposing himself to the servant girls like any vulgar person might do. David retorted to Michal, "I was dancing before the Lord, who chose me over your father and all his family. He appointed me as leader of Israel, the people of the Lord. So I celebrate before the Lord. Yes, and I am willing to look even more foolish than this, even to be humiliated in my own eyes. But those servant girls you mentioned will indeed think I am distinguished." So Michal, the daughter of Saul, remained childless throughout her life. As I said, it's kind of a weird chapter, if you just read through it like that. But I think there's kind of 3 events here, and I think they're all interrelated. There's the first procession with the ark, where Uzzah died. There's the second procession, where King David did his dancing. And then at the very end, there's this vignette with Michal. I think these are all connected. So we're going to look at kind of each part as a section. First off with Uzzah, it says his son of Abinadab, probably grandson or great-grandson even possibly. And the Hebrew that's here says literally, sent his hand to the ark and grabbed it. And then later, Eugene Peterson has a really good take on this chapter with his Message Bible, when he says that God blazed in anger against Uzzah and struck him because he had profaned the chest. The Greek adds because of his indiscretion. The idea here is that is trying to be relayed is that this is not a the way that Uzzah, and probably his brother too, Ahio, handled the ark is too casually. Previously, the ark had just been sitting here. Okay, it had been stolen by the Philistines many years ago. Philistines caught all kinds of plagues and disasters from it, so they just kind of brought it to the border of Israel and dropped it and said, "We don't want it no more." Just left it. And it's been sitting here for many years in this household. Now the household, they're supposed to be part of the priesthood, but it seems that after so many years, the Ark of the Covenant of God was almost like a coffee table to them. It was just another piece of furniture. There's the thing there, yeah, it's pretty, it's great. They didn't really have a lot of respect for it. Again, Peterson says in one of his commentaries, instead of losing himself in worship, Uzzah has God in a box and officiously assumes responsibility for keeping God safe from the mud and the dust of the world. It's not a knee-jerk reaction, him reaching out to catch the ark. That was the norm. touching what should not be touched, handling casually what should not be handled casually. There's an inference that Uzzah was killed because of his presumption that God needed to be taken care of, instead of accepting God's ability to take care of himself and the rest of the world at the same time. David also didn't understand this. He didn't understand why God had burst out against Uzzah in the first place. So he was attempting respect, bringing the ark to Jerusalem, but he did it in a way that was convenient for him. I can't remember who wrote that last quote, but Uzzah was acting fussily functioning, he says. He manages a religious business. That is never how God is wanting to be approached, right? Just as in a casual manner, just as a business matter. So, we have in this case one who is not taking God seriously enough. If we think in theological terms of transcendence and immanence, or what I previously said was intimacy and distance, Uzzah was way too buddy-buddy, way too intimate with God. So, let's go to the other end of the chapter then, because I think this is one extreme. Let's look at the other extreme. Oh, I went to the middle first. Never mind. I forgot where I did this. Chronological is how I did it. So, after this, 3 months pass. David comes back, right, and then brings the ark to Jerusalem. Now, in 1 Chronicles 15, it actually gives a bit more detail about what happens here. First off, David figured out what he was supposed to have done in the first place. He actually goes to the priests and the Levites and say, okay, what is the law says we're supposed to handle this? How are we supposed to do it? He actually took the time to figure it out. And we know this because it says that, again, in 1 Chronicles, that he commanded that no one but the Levites carry the ark of God, and that they were to use the poles that the ark was meant to be carried with. So he finally got that figured out. And now he returns, and the procession happens as it was meant to. Robert Barron, a Catholic bishop, says that this was a festive but sacrificial attitude. And people were aware both of their blessing and their sin. They understood now what not to do, and they were getting things right. The dancing is very interesting because Peterson translated it as with great abandon. The word for dancing here is the same word as that just signifies something round. Like you would say a loaf of bread is round. Kind of saying that David was doing some kind of crazy whirling, spinning constantly. David was also acting as a priestly worship leader here. The priestly garment was an ephod he actually wore, which was a priestly garment. That, yes, priests used, but also worship leaders would use in worshiping God. For example, Samuel, when he was a boy, he would wear an ephod when he was serving in the temple. And they also went about with the sounds of horns. I have a whole other paper if you're interested in looking at the different kinds of horns used in the Bible. And the shofar, typically made of ram's horn, it signifies God's movement, God acting. This was not just a let y'all know we're coming, or we're just having fun blowing horns. It was signifying God is moving here and we're coming with him. This parade becomes a liturgical event, a worshipful ceremony that has God placed rightly as the object and subject of people's adoration. And at the end we see that David blesses the people on behalf of God. He blesses them. And then he blesses them on behalf of himself, giving them gifts. The bread and the cakes that were used, this is like 3 or 4 days worth of food for a family that he was just passing out to everyone. So, David figured something out here, and we're going to return to this in a moment to figure out what it was besides just the law that he finally understood. At the end, Michal, daughter of Saul. It says twice, daughter of Saul. It's David's wife. The writer is trying to put distance between Michal and David here. They've been married for quite a while at this point. And this is well after Saul had passed away. So just signifying that this is part of Saul's family. They're just trying to, like, okay, Michal's going to get put to the side here now. You notice that it says that she saw this from a high vantage point, or from a window. She did not join. All the people who said that were down here, part of this parade, not Michal. Whatever it is that's keeping her from joining them is causing a problem, because she sees David and despises him in her heart. Now, she blames it on his frolicking naked, basically. Which is funny because, as I just said, we do see that he was wearing an ephod. He had clothes on. But there is something about it that she saw as flaunting himself as sexually available to others. Whether that's true or not, that's how she saw it. And she calls him, what was the phrase that she used? As any vulgar, exposing himself as any vulgar person might do. Here the Hebrew is saying, as any empty person might do. Empty as being without the ability to sort right from wrong. And when you read this part of it, you can just hear the vitriol between them, right? It's so full of sarcasm. David's response is, as we said in the message here, in God's presence, I'll dance, and I'll dance all I want. I'm going to do it. I've done it. I'm going to do it again. You can't stop me. Now, some have said that part of Michal's problem may have been what she saw of God through her father Saul. In 1 Samuel, we see Saul a couple times attempting to appease God, but again, doing it his own way and being chastised very harshly for it. So for her, God is dangerous. You should not get close to God. You should stay far away from this God. And at the end, finally, we see that she was barren for the rest of her life. Whether that's because God made her barren or David just refused to be with her anymore, uncertain. But there's some consequence for this. All right. So between these, we have two extremes. Uzzah was too intimate with God. He took God way too buddy-buddy, way too close. He didn't understand God as being holy and separate. Michal was the opposite. She wanted God much more than just an arm's length away. She wanted nothing to do with him, except for a cursory matter. We'll do the religious things we need to do, we'll call it good. Both are dangerous, though. As this says, I keep reading where Peter's closer. Well, this one's from Peterson as well. To be present at the place of worship and not to worship is both common and dangerous. Refusal to worship the living God results in loss of life, death in the case of Uzzah, and barrenness in the case of Michal. Uzzah and Michal serve as both warning and rebuke to all who are more interested in the protocol of worship than in worshiping God. Even David's behavior at first kind of is an admonition to the reader. Because we know that David was very close to God, right? Many psalms he's written about him, and they had a close relationship, but he still failed to observe the regulations that safeguard the respect for God's holiness. Peterson would later write that that's why the first thing that Jesus teaches us to pray is, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. So that respect isn't forgotten. He said, I love this phrase, Peterson wrote that, otherwise we forget that respect for God. Privilege becomes presumption. So, what I think is the middle ground, what David found was a sense of wonder in balancing these two tensions, holding them both at the same time. Again, turning to Barron, he wrote that only in the light of the connection to Adam can we fully understand the energetic dance of the king before the ark of Yahweh. Before the fall, Adam danced in unison with Yahweh. Sin is nothing but falling out of step with God, and insistence upon dancing to one's own rhythm. The whole of the history of salvation might be characterized as Yahweh's attempt to restore the sacred dance, to get his human creatures to move with him. Accordingly, David, dancing with energy before the ark, is humanity dancing with Yahweh, recovering the effortless harmony of Eden. So, this is where Bible lesson is going to end. I want to ask some more participation from you all. So these ideas of transcendence or distance, intimacy or immanence, and in the middle, the sense of wonder, I think that most of us find ourselves leaning towards one or the other of these ideas. I'm going to go first. I'll tell you mine. I lean much more towards the transcendence and the distance of God. That was partially how I was raised, and which was in the early and mid-90s, and when the contemporary Christian music scene was coming about, I was immediately adverse to it. It took me a while to warm up to it, because that's where my personality was lending itself. I was from a church where we used hymnals every Sunday. That's how we did it. Maybe it's also just part of my personality, but it's part of my upbringing too. How about any of you? You have one of these that you kind of lean just a little bit towards, one or the other?
I would say that I don't know if this is the result of a broken world or God created me this way intentionally, but I have the nature of a skeptic, and I think the aspect of immanence and intimacy is one that is hard for me to be inclined towards, kind of similar to what you were saying. So I think more of like the intellectual side of things is where my brain goes, because I view it as just like, oh, that's a firm truth that I know to be true about God, rather than something that maybe that I rest in.
Sure. Yeah. Anyone else?
I tend to think of my relationship with God as a table set for two, so I guess more of the intimate nature of the, personal connection.
Sure, yeah. This might just take more reflection too, to kind of find what is immediately appealing to you. And I don't think either's bad. No, sorry.
I also think that, I don't know, in my perspective, it makes a difference if we're thinking about one-on-one, like you said, just devotional life, as opposed to being a corporate setting. So that may change the behavior a little bit depending on what the activity is going on. And so I think the context also may influence where I am.
Sure.
And I think season of life too. I would say at different seasons of life, I would kind of lean into one more than the other, depending on circumstance.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, none of us to say that either is bad. It's just we're all along the spectrum, kind of moving back and forth, I think, a lot. So on one of the pages, it says brainstorming. I just want to take some time and think of maybe some different parts of worship, different acts, different songs that may lean towards one or the other. Because if we're, as worship leaders, trying to find some amount of balance between these sometimes, it's good to just be able to identify which might lean towards one or the other. So this is intimacy, the immanence. I thought of just a couple. The hymn "Near My God to Thee." I can't imagine it's something that keeps me distant from God. Or the what's her name? The Macmillan "King of My Heart." Again, it's something that's so very, very personal. I think it's hard for me to think of it as a distant song. A call to worship, which we often find in traditional churches, but for me, the invitation, especially an invitation coming from God to us, seems like a very personal thing. He's not saying keep your distance from me, I'm too holy. He's saying literally, come closer, let's commune together. And raised hands, mostly, again, that's my upbringing. We didn't raise hands in my church growing up. That was a bit too personal. So any other thoughts of what acts of worship, maybe certain songs, anything that we do in our corporate worship that might lean more towards that intimate, personal relationship side?
confession of sin.
Confession, that's a good one. Yeah.
Maybe some would argue with like aesthetic choices would create more of an intimate, like vertical connection with God. But I guess intimacy with the people around you within, I guess, like actively acknowledging the presence of God together is also important. But maybe if the lights are out, you could consider that more of an intimate moment depending
yeah.
on you and the person.
Makes it kind of easier to block everyone and everything else out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many songs that use the first person pronouns. It's like, no, that's definitely things that direction.
I guess depending on how we frame it, I think the time of giving offerings can be something that this is from me to you, God.
Sure.
Or the passing of the peace.
Ooh, passing the peace. I also thought, just the season of Advent, we focus so much on God being Emmanuel, right? God with us. A lot of that Advent Christmas season is a very intimate time. It's also just on our brain because it's Christmas planning season right now. Anything else? Any other ideas?
I'll say like intercession.
Intercession, sure. Part of why I wanted to bring this whole thing is I'm working through this myself still, so I'm trying to learn with you all, get feedback and continue to figure this out. So let's go to the other side then. What acts of worship might recognize God's transcendence or his holiness, separateness, distance from us? Again, I have just a few ideas. Holy, holy, holy Lord God Almighty. I couldn't think of a way to make that a very intimate song. Maybe someone else smarter than me can, but or Chris Tomlin's Holy Forever. The doxology, singing the Old 100th. Reciting the Apostles' Creed. Those are miraculous.
Am I allowed to say confession of sin for this one too?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think there's a lot of acts of worship that, depending on how we go about them, how we approach them, can be one or the other. And it's, I think, really good to recognize because at some times we want one or the other, right? Depending on the service, the emphasis, the season, etc.
I would say conviction and discernment.
Conviction, discernment. Okay.
I think we may be moved, if we consider, let's say, if you have an amazing view of a waterfall, or when you are contemplate nature or something. I remember when we came here in Waco for the eclipse, you know, the eclipse that was kind of, we were right under there, and it was kind of a very kind of moment filled with awe, because it was something that we, I mean, for people that believe in God and can say, what an interesting message. I mean, so this sight that was so special, kind of something that's completely beyond our control, and the whole time, the whole thing of, it's going to be a cloud in front of it, the sky, is this going to be visible? And until the last minute, the kind of there was nothing anybody could do about it. And in the end, it was just the perfect way here in Waco. So to me, I think it moves me sometimes to look at something like that.
Yeah. There's a church a friend of mine goes to in Fort Worth, I'm forgetting what it's called, but it's in a park, and most of the sides of the sanctuary is just all glass. So you're just surrounded by nature. It's awesome.
So songs about heaven, like when we all get to heaven, how fly away, that sort of language, feel the vast nature of the world.
What's the one? Revelation song comes to mind. I think it talks about holy, 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 holy. Any song mentions the word holy, I guess, for me.
I think also maybe in the context of a funeral service, when we kind of come very close to this great mystery of death. And we again, it's the unknown, there's nothing we can do. We just have to live it. And I think those moments can be also very impactful.
I think some churches incorporate like a verbal encouragement for people to physically express themselves in certain ways. So kneeling, prostrating, bowing. I tend to think of those things as more of a transcendent aspect. Like at my Revelation professor, we listened through Revelation song. He was like, this is not a song where I want to like reach my hands up to God. It's one where like I want to be on my knees, like recognizing who He is. So that too.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, our posture definitely can change that feeling. I also thought of Christ the King Sunday. If your churches observe Christ the King Sunday right before Advent, recognizing Christ as the ascended King of the universe, or Good Friday, being one that we want to draw close to it, but it's so uncomfortable to get that close to the cross. All right, well, last one is, what can we think of that is in the middle? And this is the hardest one that I'm struggling with a lot. How do we balance the tension? From Briscoe, he writes, some people focus on the transcendence of God. He's so high and holy they cannot approach Him. Others stress His immanence. God is their friend, available at all times. The biblical balance is that we keep both in tension. We must never act as if He is remote, but we must never allow Him to degenerate into being our buddy. The Ark of the Covenant helps us remember both aspects. The only thing that I come up with that I think is, in my opinion, is innately right in the middle of this spectrum is Holy Communion. I think by its very nature, this is the spot where a holy God is meeting with us in the most intimate way. Here is my body, here is my blood, given for you.
I think in my congregation, from time to time, we have times of testimony that's really old school. But that can be something that somebody's going to share something that's about their own experience, something that happened to them. So it's in a sense this human experience, but the point is God's intervention, God's providence, and we can all relate to that. I think it's almost to say, this is not in the Bible, but could be. So I think it's kind of a reminder that God, this great God can do amazing things, but He's near to us. So I think sometimes testimonies can be very touching.
Yeah. Anyone else have any other ideas?
I think kind of similarly to that, baptism, actually, is like the visible aspect of it, I think just plays a big part. I get a lot of wonder, especially when I see like old people and children being baptized. There's something about it, and the intimacy of that moment, especially if like you're familiar with the person in the church, and you like watch the way that God is working in their lives.
Yeah.
It's interesting because both of those things, baptism and communion, are things that are kind of distinctly Christian, that you don't really have equivalents for outside of the Christian church. That would create wonder. I think that's really interesting. So it's kind of the distinctives.
It's also the two sacraments that all Christian beliefs hold as sacrament. All right. Well, I hope your brains are percolating a little bit into this realm. The last one we'll do with the time we have left is some experimenting. Again, like I said, I'm learning with you all. I'm trying to understand how this works, especially in the practical context as well. And sometimes I think that the wonder also comes not just from being in the middle, but from movement along the spectrum. I think sometimes when you find something that's normally talking about God being holy, and we can make it a little bit personal, it creates that sense of wonder. Or vice versa, something we find that's usually very intimate, and it creates a little bit of distance for us. I think there's a sense of wonder in there as well. Unfortunately, those kind of movements can be uncomfortable because we expect blank, but we're moving somewhere else. I started writing words that I was thinking of as what could happen when this movement kind of occurs. It can be liberating, it can be difficult to pull off. It can feel awkward. Even if it's done right, it can be awkward. It's freeing because it frees you up to lots of different possibilities, but you also have lots of different possibilities now. So, is it worth it? I don't know yet. So we're going to try some things to see if my attempts at creating a little bit of movement along our spectrum may help or hurt the cause that we're seeking. So that's the next page of your handout. I have just a few things we're going to try out. The first one I thought of was the song "Great Is Thy Faithfulness." This, I think, maybe you'll agree with me, maybe not, is a bit more of a transcendent song, right? We're talking about the greatness of God. Even has some of that nature imagery in it, pointing us toward God's holiness. But great is thy faithfulness is normally in 3 meter, right? Which also in classical terms, people tend to think of as they being a royal meter. Lots of things, it's in 3 to pronounce royalty. So I thought, what if, to kind of move away from that transcendent side, we put it in 4 instead of 3? Will that make a difference? So we're going to try it out. I have for you on that page, the first 2 verses are in 4. It's going to feel awkward for a moment, and I'm probably going to mess up because I still think in 3 as well. And the 3rd verse is in 3. So we'll see if it makes a difference. Here we go.
There is no shadow.
time signature make a difference? You can say yes and no.
Seems like a
A little bit? Okay.
For me, the text of the song is so, at first, the verses acknowledge God's transcendence, but then the chorus is more personal.
Good thought, yeah.
So I think the style with which we play it can make a difference, but in this case, I think it's more about the text.
Okay, that's fair enough. Any other thoughts? Oops. Just turn it off.
I thought the same thing because we hear the verses we talk about, kind of creation and the seasons of life and nature and all of this, but then I see in your verses, you have provided everything I need. And in addition to all of this greatness, you are faithful to me. So it's kind of, we put ourselves in that story. So there is a shift, I think, in the text anyway, when we are singing. I think the harmony is also.
I can say I've tried this with some of my churches before, and it's not been successful so far. People have a hard time dealing with that first beat being silent of every measure. It always ends up being more awkward than anything else. That's why it's an experiment. All right, another idea. The other song you have there, this is a song I'm not familiar. Well, there's two of them. By Sovereign Grace, they came out with this 5 years ago now. Wow, feels new to me still. We talked that Advent was one of those times where we typically have a bit more sense of intimacy with God, right? Emmanuel, God with us. But this song kind of is a take on "O come all ye faithful," and they changed it to "O come all you unfaithful." And the point is, it kind of puts our need for Christ in the story. So it's not just, yay, baby Jesus is here, great, presents, lights. It's, no, he's here and there's a reason for it. I had one pastor I worked with in Detroit who, he told me he once went to a Christmas concert at one of the big churches up there, and he felt so awkward when towards the end of this Christmas concert, they started having songs about Christ's death and resurrection. It's not time for that yet. I don't want that yet. All right, and I said, but isn't that why he came? Isn't that the reason? So, if you don't know this, we're going to try this out and just see if this idea of putting our need, putting the idea that we are sinful, God is holy, we need of Him, into a Christmas setting might also find some kind of balance. right. Thoughts?
This is one of my absolute favorite songs. The last time, I think what you were saying about like just backing into the discussion about the intimate aspect of that. The last time I wrote this, there was a woman that came up and she was just, I had never really seen her like show emotion before, like really ever, other than just like she's really, and she was just like, there's just a downpour. And it was a beautiful moment, and you know, she was just surrendering some things that she'd been struggling with to me, and like asking me what the name of the song was, so that she could go and listen to it again. It was a beautiful moment of confession, and so something like this can lead to moments like that, which I think are like those relationships. That's really what builds up the body of Christ, the kingdom of Jesus. So I love it.
I think it's a good reminder for the church that this is a place for all people.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the Christmas modern version of the old "Come Just As You Are" invitation hymn. It's like, you know, the beauty of this song is that while it is deeply personal, it works well as a congregational song. So it's
Absolutely,
like
yeah.
all singing this together, creating that space for, you know, those who need to make decisions. That's good.
It's so interesting that there is no speaking to God in this song, right? There's no you, I. It's the congregation speaking to one another, right? Which I think is also a different topic for another time. But you know, also a good thing that can change. So sometimes we speak to God through our song. Sometimes we speak to each other. Sometimes we speak to the outside world. Another instance, something like this that happened to me was during COVID, right after. I was in Michigan, in Detroit during COVID, and Detroit was completely locked down. It was crazy. And I know everyone felt the strain of that time, especially in churches. You know, everyone's trying to do online church. Most of it failed. Even my own church, it wasn't great. You know, we were trying, but because we're meant to be together, right? There's supposed to be some amount of intimacy both with God and with each other. And I remember when we were finally being let out, you know, finally being able to come back together, and we started making plans to have worship in our church again for the first time in, I think it was a year and a half for us or something like that. It was crazy. And so, because we hadn't done it for so long, and we had forgotten basically everything we'd done, you know, we had like all the teams come together, our ushers and our musicians. We were, you know, just walking through the service, just to get a reminder of what it is that we do together. And I was introducing a new song to the congregation at the same time, the Getty's Holy Spirit, Living Breath of God. And as we were coming back together to close our training time, the musicians were going through it up on the chancel, and everyone just started coming in and then just standing and just listening. And it wasn't so much the song is great, but you could just sense the idea that everyone's like, all right, togetherness. We've been separate for so long, now we can come together. There is a moment of just this gorgeous spirit about the place. So, just a few minutes left. So my hope with all of this is that what you take away is looking at how your churches worship, thinking kind of along these lines. So what's our goal right now? Are we trying to create that separateness, acknowledging God as holy, or is this a time where we're trying to draw closer? How can we make some of those movements if we do want to move? I don't think every service needs to be sloshing back and forth on the spectrum. Some services, need to be one, some need to be the other. But then being purposeful about, okay, if we want this moment of wonder here, where are we moving from and to, and how can we make that happen? As I said, I'm working on coming up with my own ideas for this too, because every church context is very different, and what works in some places does not work in others. I just moved here last year from Detroit, and I can tell you, most of what I did for that church in Detroit, I can't do here in Texas. It does not translate well. I keep trying and I keep saying, eh. Yeah, so there's lots for us to learn and to continue to think about. I have one more example which I didn't include because I wasn't sure if we would have time, but there's a version of It Came Upon a Midnight Clear I was thinking of, and I couldn't, as I look at something, I don't know where I placed the carol It Came Upon a Midnight Clear on the spectrum of distance and intimacy. Because it's just a lot of very nice imagery, kind of, you know? But I like this arrangement, and then it ends with just a little bit, "Oh, come, let us adore him." So I want to get your thoughts on this, because I don't know. This is one where I'm not sure yet, and I would love some opinions. It goes...
It'd be worth noting that Edmund Sears was a Unitarian, so
Say again?
Edmund Sears, who wrote that song, was a Unitarian, so it might make a difference in how we
Oh, really?
interpret some of that.
I like that you ended it unresolved. That was nice. A little nice touch.
You can sometimes get away with that. The last choir director I worked with hated it every time I did that.
This is a final thought about the one that you just played, the
Yeah.
O Come All You Unfaithful, is thinking about, I think it does well balancing the individual, the transcendence and the immanence, but also the individual and the corporate. Looking at measure 6 in the last beat, the pronouns, verse 2 and 4 are your God, see what your God has done. So your, and then verse 3, his perfect love, and then the last verse, our God. So individual and collective as well, as us, and then I guess the horizontal and the vertical.
All right, well, that's our time. Thank you all for joining me and helping me work through this. And I hope you found it interesting, inspiring, useful, whatever else may be. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you next year.
Thank you.